Hello, and welcome back to Juhan of Grann's fascinating images of life out there. In the previous episode, we showed you these phenomena from a scientific point of view. We also showed you how mainstream science and our leaders, our political, religious, and economic leaders, shun away from uncomfortable facts, like the hecklers of Galileo did in his time. Now, we will show you how far these leaders will go to cover up the conspiracies and the denials. We will also probe into the realities of the universe, and while we're doing that, we might break down some very solid brick walls. We feel that this is for the benefit of ordinary human beings, just like you and me. Maybe a higher intelligence will help us sort out this tremendous mess we have made out of ourselves and our planet. The power of the mind moves mountains, as we will show you during the next hour. So stay with us.
People should really not fear their governments. But with all these various UFO investigations going on, many researchers have told me that they fear aliens much less than their own tax-supported federal agents or so-called military intelligence officials.
I do know other abductees who've had these same interrogation procedures happen, and quite often they're told, you won't talk about this. You won't talk, and if you talk, we're going to hurt you, we're going to hurt your husband, we're going to hurt your kids, or if it's a man, they'll say, you know, we'll ruin your career, we're going to hurt your kids. You know, they'll say this kind of stuff. And, or you'll suddenly get sick and you won't know how, or, you know, and they threaten people.
Under President Reagan, it was made easier to keep information classified. I've been to 15 archives. There's loads of old material that is still classified. I think the documents are going to cause a great deal more information. Unfortunately, many people have attacked them using the 4 rules for debunkers, for noisy negativists. First, what the public doesn't know, I'm not going to tell them, so leave out significant information. Second, don't bother me with the facts. My mind's made up. All sorts of claims were made that are not substantiated. Third, if you can't attack the data, attack the people. And fourth, don't do your research by investigation. Do it by proclamation. People who've never been to archives will tell you all kinds of stories about documents that simply aren't true.
Yes, aliens are real. Yes, they're here all the time. Yes, they operate in amongst us, in and around us all the time. But governments are not involved. Governments know as much about, the public knows more about UFOs than governments and militaries do.
What we've concluded from what we've observed with these spacecraft and communicating with them is that they have technologies that interface directly with thought. And this is something which is extraordinary to most humans, but we have to maintain a sense of humility because a flashlight or a telephone or a laser would be extraordinary to people 200 years ago.
It's almost incomprehensible for the average person to believe that a race can go back and change time, change the event from happening. Until those kinds of ideas, time travel, are accepted, Roswell is not going to make sense. And the only thing that will make sense is a government conspiracy. It's that simple.
This theory that I have regarding the Kennedy assassination was actually also helps to put into context another topic that I'm investigating and writing about, and this is the mysterious deaths of UFO researchers. Well, from 1982 to 1988, there were a series of mysterious deaths involving British scientists connected to the Marconi Systems defense contractor and other contractors who worked for the Strategic Defense Initiative under the Reagan administration. It was known as the Star Wars defense system.
As we see here, Ted Oliphant joined the police force only to be able to study the cattle mutilations more closely. Mutilations are strong circumstantial evidence of ET intruders among us. Detective Ted Oliphant studied 35 cases and came to only one conclusion.
This is from the Dawson case. This animal was found one morning and it had the jaw stripped completely to the bone. It had been stripped in a large oval incision, encompassed the upper lip and the lower lip. The tongue had been cut from the animal's throat deep, and the anus and the vagina had been cored out like you'd taken a stovepipe and shoved it in the animal and tore the tissue out. There was no blood on the animal. Again, this is a physical trace case where we found the white powder on the animal. It had aluminum, titanium, oxygen, and silicone on it. There was no physical traces outside of the white powder that we found. We could find no footprints or track marks or wheel marks or anything to indicate that somebody had gone in and done this to the animal.
So what's so strange about the death of this particular animal, Detective Oliphant?
This animal was found about 9 hours after it had been mutilated. There was a lot of blood present in this case, which was very unusual. What was typical was we had the large oval or keyhole incision, but this time there was a lot of blood present. And even 9 hours later, after this animal had been killed, blood is still moving from the animal. This is very unusual. Animals never bleed this long. Nobody ever bleeds this long. So 9 hours later, it's still bleeding. Why? I don't know. We took this animal to the State Diagnostic Laboratory in Albertville, in Boaz area, and they could not tell us what killed the animal, but they said it's definitely not the work of a predator. And me and several other police officers have puzzled over who could have done this to this animal and why.
So what is your conclusion?
Well, a lot of people ask me who I think is responsible for these mutilations that I've seen in Alabama as a police officer. People say, well, maybe it's the government doing this. Well, certainly in 90% of the cases, we had helicopters at the cases. So people wonder, maybe is the government involved? It's a good possibility that the our American tax dollars were involved in this. It's very possible. Other people look at this and they say, well, anything so strange, the aliens must be doing it. Well, I don't know who's doing it because we never arrested anybody, we never caught anybody, so I can't tell you who's doing it because I don't know.
Kathy Davis has seen more. She feels aliens study human genes, that aliens actually abducted her mother and even her unborn children. This is Kathy Davis's shocking story.
Earlier on, when I was younger, growing up, I had medical examinations, I guess for lack of a better way to put them, where samples of my tissue and hair and skin and nails and saliva were removed. And painful, alarming gynecological exams were performed on me. And I was never told why. I was never given any explanation as to why they were doing this to me. I don't think they intentionally wanted to hurt me, because there were a lot of times when I would feel pain, they would take the pain away. I was absolutely petrified of any of this. I was afraid of life. I was afraid to go out at night. I spent an entire month in my nightgown. I wouldn't even get dressed, go anywhere. I didn't trust anybody. I was afraid to go near the window at night. I'm not so much that way anymore. I've calmed down quite a bit. I've learned to cope. I feel as if I am in some kind of control of myself, if nothing else. And I'm not nearly as frightened of an experience as I used to be. I still have that initial shock.
One lady said to me that she became pregnant and she was with a partner. There was absolutely no reason why she shouldn't have gone on with this pregnancy. But she said to me, I just went and had an abortion because I knew I just had to get rid of it. And when they went to the clinic to actually have the abortion, the pregnancy test was done. All the medical procedures around confirming the pregnancy were done, so she was absolutely certain of her pregnancy. She knew it was real. Her partner couldn't understand why she wanted to go ahead, but he respected the fact that she wanted this abortion. When they went to do the abortion, there was no fetus. She said, it's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. 1 minute, there you are pregnant, the ultrasound will be done, and many women have had ultrasound, showing a fetus, showing the pregnancy's fine. The next thing, nothing. One lady said to me in the hills of Rollestone, which is in Perth, I know I have had 20 pregnancies through my abduction experiences. 20 children I've had. They range from 15 right down to a tiny, tiny baby. And she says, and I've seen them. And I actually said to the ETs, now look, This is beyond a joke. It's getting too hard for me, you know? I can't have this happening to my body so regularly. I need a break. And interestingly, it appears that they listened because she's actually had a break from it. She told me that her young daughter, when she was less than 2 years old, went up to the bookshelf, and there was lots and lots of books, many books of all different kinds in the bookshelf. And this child was less than 2 years old, picked one book out, and the book was Communion by Whitley Strieber with the grey face on the front, and said, "Mummy, this is the man that takes me away." And she was not even 2 years old.
Lloyd Pye challenges the very core of Darwinism. He claims that something strange happened during the 120,000 years between Neanderthal erectus and Homo sapiens, the missing link.
The problem with that theory is that there is no science that can verify it as actually being possible for that to occur. You would need, for a first living thing, millions, perhaps hundreds of thousands at a minimum, perhaps millions at a maximum, of lipids to make a membrane to hold that living thing. You would need cytoplasm or something to give it substance within its body. You would need 5 to 10 strands of DNA at a minimum to do the housekeeping required to take nourishment from the environment and to put waste back out from the body when the nourishment had been turned into energy. It would have to be able to reproduce itself ad infinitum. All of that has to happen at once. It can't happen piecemeal. It can't be put together in parts. So when you just look at the very beginnings of life, you see that Darwinism is impossible. Furthermore, in the ongoing fossil record that we have for subsequent formation of life and species, they never develop one from another. That's what Darwin postulated, that macroevolution would be possible, that sea worms could turn into fish, fish could turn into amphibians, amphibians could turn into reptiles, reptiles could turn into mammals and birds, that gills could turn into lungs, that fins could turn into limbs. There's no evidence for any of that, and yet it is absolutely required by Darwin's theory. All that Darwin saw on the Galapagos was microevolution, which is evolution in parts of bodies, and he just assumed, he just guessed, he projected that whole bodies could change given enough time. It was logical. It is logical. It just simply is not borne out by the facts. We've had 140 years to look for that evidence. It's not there. It's not going to be there. That is not how life develops on Earth. Life seems to be, if you read the fossil record fairly and truly, life seems to be brought here in great loads, in great amounts. It is as if the Earth is being terraformed by some superior entity or entities somewhere else, but there seems to be a conscious ongoing program of development of life on Earth, but it is not being developed here in and of itself in the terrestrial, strictly within the terrestrial bounds. There is some kind of outside intervention occurring. Whether that is interpreted as extraterrestrial or divine is up to the individual, but it is not happening entirely here.
And while in Costa Rica, we zoom in on Enrique Rincon.
We are ready, Dave.
Enrique Castillon Rincon is in contact with the Pleiades, or so we claim.
Este primer encuentro marcó para mí un cambio radical en mi vida, en mi forma de pensar, en mi forma de vivir. Me he dedicado por estos 25 años a contarle al mundo lo que me pasó, a expensas de calumnias, de ataques, de vilipendios y de cosas terribles que se han dicho de mí. Sin embargo, todo lo que tiene que ver con la presencia alienígena o extraterrestre en nuestro planeta es algo que no podemos negar. Y que a raíz de este encuentro, en donde me dieron información de tipo, más que nada, mesiánico, espiritual, me dieron información humanística, información tecnológica, científica, y que Con el paso del tiempo me he ido dando cuenta de que en el momento del contacto yo no estaba bien estructurado. Me faltó hacer muchas preguntas que hoy en día me las hago cuando ya ellos dejaron de contactarme.
Enrique Ricón was subjected to lie detector tests and regressive hypnosis. No signs of deviations from his wide-awake recountals were detected.
Lähde lomalle suomalaiseen kylpylään. Valittavanasi lähes 30 ylellistä kohdetta. Hae uusi, hyvän olon lomaopas matkatoimistostasi. Suomalaiset kylpylät.
To represent him. No surprise to me that he's haggling over child support. I'm sure all of Mel's money is inside the G-string of that lap dancer.
Mom.
Well, I'm sorry, Aaron. But that's the way it is.
Enrique met a Swiss girl, Cyril Weiss. Some years later, they met again under very mysterious circumstances on an alien ship. It sounds like a scene from X-Files, but for Enrique, it was real. It changed his whole life. Who was Cyril? Had Enrique been in physical contact with a real alien?
En este corto lapso de casi 3 años, desde la fecha del encuentro del 3 de noviembre del 73 hasta este 17 de febrero del 76, los extraterrestres me contactaron por 5 veces. Y estoy hablando de encuentros físicos, de tuercas y tornillos. No estoy hablando de desdoblamientos, no hablo de viajes astrales, no hablo de ningún informe que pueda sustraerse a la realidad. No tiene nada que ver con fenómenos paranormales ni con espiritismo. No tiene nada que ver tampoco con la llegada de dioses a contactar a Enrique Castillo, seres divinizados en la antigüedad. Enrique Castillo no es un elegido, no me considero ni siquiera especial. Más bien este encuentro me hizo cambiar en muchos aspectos. Perdí la empresa que yo dirigía, perdí las acciones, perdí la amistad de muchas personas conocidas y lo que más me dolió en aquella época fue que perdí mi matrimonio después de 22 años. Mi esposa me pidió el divorcio.
From Costa Rica, Colombia, and the Pleiades to UFOs in Puerto Rico, Jorge Margue.
For many years, I've been investigating UFO incidents in the island of Puerto Rico in the Caribbean. Puerto Rico has always been known for being a site in which a lot of UFO activity occurs, also alien activity. Many important incidents have happened there in the last years. I would say that, for example, for the audience to have an idea, in 1988 in December, several jet fighters from the US Navy combat planes were abducted in mid-air and disappeared by a huge saucer with the shape, I would say, of a huge triangle. They were captured in mid-air during an encounter between United States Navy combat planes and this object, and afterward the jet fighters disappeared. This was observed by hundreds of witnesses in the area of Cabo Rojo, to the southwest of Puerto Rico.
How long do we expect this curtain of secrecy to last? I don't see any near end to it. It's considered, by my government, it's considered a national security problem. And I think other nations consider it a national security problem in the same sense. And this comes from the fact that if the contacts are real, and if we have crash residue and are studying it, and if we're in contact with alien intelligence, any nation having such information has the potential for a technological breakthrough of some kind. And in the history of warfare, any nation possessing
such a technological advantage has often had the advantage in the conflict and win the war. So we all keep it quiet.
And now we are back to you in Las Vegas. Juhan, do you hear me? Do you have Prudence Calabrese there? Juhan, ready to broadcast?
Yes, Dave. We are ready. Already here.
We are getting closer to the core, closer to the mystery of our very existence. Let me introduce you to the trained physicist Prudence Calabrese and her theories about remote viewing, brain waves, creativity, etc.
2 years ago, when I first had learned remote viewing, had been practicing it for some time, was working at the Farset Institute as the vice president, I started having a strange series of encounters that have continued to this day. I woke up in the middle of the night at 2:30 a.m. to go to the bathroom. And when I went in there, there was a little gray alien, about 42 inches high, standing in my bathroom on the bath mat. And he scared me. I tried to scream and I couldn't scream. And he was very scary to me. And he smelled terrible. He smelled like cheesy men's cologne mixed with oranges. And I tried to scream and I couldn't, and he left the room. He just disappeared. And then what he did is he came back the next night. He came back night after night after night, and it continued. It just continued. And every time he showed up, I tried to be less afraid, but I was always afraid. And finally one day I decided I was going to be a scientist about this, because that's what I am at heart. And I was not going to be afraid. I was going to observe it like a scientist. And he showed up the next night, and that night I was still afraid. But he did give me a telepathic message that I call a thought ball, because it's nonlinear. It's a complete package of information that that you have to pick all the different pieces out of it using skills kind of like remote viewing, trying to figure out what it means. And I don't get messages about love and about peace and the Galactic Federation and all those kinds of things many other contactees get. I get very basic information about how to improve our remote viewing system and how to take this technology further, because remote viewing is going to be extremely important in the next millennium, and all humans are going to need to learn how to communicate on a more intuitive and telepathic level. And we, instead of using a left-brained type of remote viewing system like the militaries, we have a cross-dominant system. So not only can you see across the boundaries of time and space, but it increases your intelligence and your creativity. And we've used this to literally solve murders for police departments, and we've found missing bodies. And we look at all kinds of interesting things for corporate America.
Mind reading, mind manipulation, and the findings of Inko Swan, the famous mind reader, are techniques used by the U.S. military. In the Persian Gulf War, U.S. intelligence used these methods frequently in pinpointing targets not detected on radar or other search devices.
These techniques that we use were developed by the U.S. military, and they take advantage of a breakthrough discovery by Ingo Swan. Ingo Swan is a great Western psychic. Ingo Swan was being paid by the U.S. government to develop psychic data, a way of using psychically derived data in a consistent fashion. He achieved the breakthrough in 1982. That breakthrough was called coordinate remote viewing, and it allowed my military team, who was a psychic team that used altered states to collect military intelligence. We now used Ingo Swan's discovery. The kinds of tools that my company uses is the kinds of tools that I think have provided insight, at least to the scientific community, into the minds and the intent of ETs.
Bill Holden served in the U.S. Air Force during the Cold War in Schweinbrücke. Once he flew with a Canadian pilot, and they both observed a UFO. Shortly afterwards, Holden served as a steward on a flight that carried President Kennedy to Berlin for his famous Ich bin ein Berliner speech. Their conversation was remarkable.
I met with President Kennedy that morning, and I happened to pick up one of the local German newspapers, the English version, and on the front page of it was just a very brilliant picture that showed two UFOs in flight amongst some trees and by the Autobahn there in Germany. And I set the paper down in front of him, and he looked at it for a moment, looked up at me, and he said, "What do you think, son?" And I looked back at him and says, "Well, what do you think, sir?" He in turn, with that fantastic smile of his, came back to me and said, "I asked you first." Kind of laughed for a moment, and then I said, well, I kind of think of it this way. I says, I believe that they're very real. And I quote the President of the United States, "You're right, son." So he had a knowledge of something that was extremely important regarding this phenomenon.
Ken Thomas connects the assassination of President Kennedy with UFOs, with aliens, with cover-ups and denials. Just a reminder, we will still spend $55 billion on arms this year.
My interest has been in the connections to characters and people involved with the assassination that were also involved in things like the Maury Island UFO incident of 1947, kind of lifelong intelligence agents, spooks, and spies that not only eventually were involved in the hit against JFK, but continue to be involved in this, what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. Now, at the time of the release of Oliver Stone's movie, there was a great resurgence of interest in the Kennedy assassination that was basically built already on a pre-existing community of researchers into conspiracy politics. So part of my interest in the assassination is really just an engagement with politics as the way they are. And I don't really view the Kennedy assassination as being just a question of who did it and let's solve the case. There's certainly many more questions connected with the case, and these questions all lead, again, to the space program, the secret space program, and elements of the kind of transnational corporate aerospace industrial milieu that is probably a more powerful political force in global politics today than the U.S. government, for instance.
So, not the communists, not the CIA, not the mafia, who are they?
Be a lot of researchers out there who would like to blame the U.S. government for the Kennedy assassination, just as they'd like to blame the mafia or the CIA. And I think what you see with my research is that it's not any of these small groups, that those are all weak forces compared to the transnational corporate state that Kennedy was coming up against and was probably victimized by.
So a Boeing industrial spy, Fred Chrisman, is behind it all, and the threat to the war industry was really the cause of Kennedy's downfall. Is that what you're saying?
Now, my research on the Kennedy assassination begins with the life history of a man named Fred Chrisman, whose records emerged as part of the Assassination Materials Review Board effort that I mentioned just a moment ago. Fred Chrisman is one of these industrial spies. He worked for Boeing Aircraft, and Jim Garrison pursued him as part of his prosecution, actually, of a man named Clay Shaw. Again, this is the subject of the Oliver Stone movie. And the interesting thing about Fred Chrisman is that he also happens to be a UFO witness of one of the earliest, earliest modern UFO sightings in the U.S., something called the Maury Island incident, which actually predated Kenneth Arnold's sightings in Mount Rainier by about 3 days. Here we have a figure who witnessed these flying saucers and got involved actually with an Air Force investigation of flying saucers in 1947. And again, Garrison was pursuing him because he worked for Boeing Aircraft, and he was an industrial spy for them, possibly an assassin or an assistant to assassins.
Specifically, what is your theory, Mr. Thomas?
And the theory that I emphasize in my research on the Kennedy assassination is that it was connected to aerospace industrial espionage. JFK's last speech, for instance, in Fort Worth, Texas, had to deal with the TFX, the Tactical Fighter Experimental, which later became the F-111, a big defense contracting boondoggle that set up the funding corridor to Australia. This contract went to Australia, that eventually helped create Pine Gap, Australia, in Alice Springs, Australia's Area 51. The tactical fighter experimental was an extremely controversial defense contract. It was supposed to go, in fact, to Boeing, but instead it went to General Dynamics.
Jim Garrison, former Court of Appeal judge in Louisiana, is still the only person who has formally demanded a hearing on Kennedy's assassination. A congressional committee investigation concluded in 1976 and 77 that a probable conspiracy was connected to the Kennedy murder and recommended that the Attorney General should investigate. Nothing has been done. The committee declared the findings secret until the year 2009. So in 9 years, we will know.
Se on roiskesuojattu. Se on iskun kestävä. Ja sillä pääset nettiin. Mitä tahansa teetkin, ota mukaasi uusi, raju Siemens M35.
PK seuraa numerosta 0700 411 411.
AD-liikkeistä Defa-lämmittimet.
Eräänä syysiltana mieleeni nousi kuva moukarinheittäjästä, joka kävelee pienen poikansa kanssa urheilukentältä kotiin. Siitä kuvasta on syntynyt tarina 3 sukupolven miehistä ja naisista ja viime vuosisadan Suomesta. Tarina isän nimeen.
PK seuraa numerosta 0700 411 411.
Bill Holden continued to serve the Air Force in top-secret missions as steward, moving top-secret divisions to destinations unknown. He had to sign a pledge of silence for 20 years. That is why these facts have only recently emerged.
We picked up additional scientific personnel and went to Colorado Springs, from there over to Alamogordo, White Sands, New Mexico. The officer party and the scientific contingency departed the bus and went on out to where there was a saucer-shaped vehicle, 2 beings, and other individuals around this vehicle. Myself, the engineer, the radio operator, and the bus driver remained at the bus. What was very interesting about this was the fact that this was a saucer-shaped vehicle and standing on 3 legs. The 2 individuals were approximately a little shorter or equal in height to those of the contingency. I could not, as I would later learn, verify as to whether they were 3-fingered, 4-fingered, 5-fingered, or 6-fingered extraterrestrial beings. They were spherical in shape as far as the face, dark eyes, and basically small nose and very thin mouth line. I did not see actually like ears. They were in a one-piece flight suit that was silver aluminum colored type, and they were light in color themselves. While we were standing there and conversing, all of a sudden, looking to our left, out of the water came this vehicle and hovered approximately 100 feet off of the deck and approximately 100 to 150 yards out. This was an elliptical shaped vehicle with a horizontal line, center line of an oscillating light back and forth. This vehicle stayed there for a few moments and then disappeared instantaneously. We were not aware of any sound. We could not see what we would consider conventional propulsion system. As there was an amount of excitement and we were able to kind of discuss what we had seen, all of a sudden it reappeared. And in observing this craft, it hovered there very, as I might say, very strong in its position. It was able to very easily maneuver up and down, horizontally left, right, and then it canted at an angle and re-entered the water in the direction that it had come from. One of the most interesting facts of this was the fact that as it departed out of the water and re-entered the water, it was as if you took a hot knife and ran it through butter. There was no explosion as it came out of the water and no implosion as it went back into the water.
Okay, we are now approaching the fun center of the world. Juhan, are you there in Las Vegas having fun, Juhan? And do you have Edgar Fouché with you, Juhan?
Yes, Dave. We are both here.
Led to no other alternative. The father should be reunited with the young boy.
Holden was not the only witness to these cover-ups. Edgar Fouché was an expert on decoding instruments, satellite communication equipment, and so on. He served at the airbase in Nellis. Suddenly, one day in 1979, he was transferred. His superiors could not tell him where to and for how long. At that time, nobody had heard about Area 51.
So we got off the bus, and the people that worked there routinely were escorted off to whatever building they worked in. This one security policeman, a young staff sergeant, signed me in and checked my identification card, gave me a temporary pass, and issued me a pair of goggles. And it's fascinating because they look like black welder's goggles that you have no peripheral vision. You can't see to your either side, and your vision beyond 30 feet is quite blurred. In fact, everyone has to wear these goggles when outside. If a M1 tank barrel had been pointed at me from 60 feet away, I wouldn't have known it. I had never experienced security quite to this level. Even when you wanted to use the bathroom facilities, you were escorted by security personnel with an M16. And it's quite disconcerting to have somebody, they call it visual observation, or VO, to be under VO continually, having somebody watch your every move, whether you're eating or working on equipment or taking a break. The Defense Advanced Research Center is located there. The acronym is called DARC, which is very appropriate, D-A-R-C. And DARC is a massive underground facility of 10 stories going underground. And the hillsides around Papoose are hangars built into the sides of hills to where the vertical takeoff and landing aircraft can land on the dry lake and taxi into the sides of these hills, and the hangars, much like aircraft decks, can be lowered down within this facility for maintenance and repair and overhaul.
One computer processor had a speed of 1 gigahertz per second. That was much faster than anything known at that time. It carried a stamp National Security Agency from as early as 1975. Was this what was classified as black program equipment?
When I say black programs, the programs that are ultra top secret have black budgets. In other words, the budget items are blacked out, and pretty much the money's not accountable. They may have a name for a program and a dollar amount, but the people that approve the budgets have only secret clearances, so they don't understand anything or have any information on these top secret programs. And the fact that there were black budget items, they're pretty much called black programs. A black program is nothing more than a super classified or ultra top secret program.
You claim that the Flying Triangle Project, which is based on the capability of dividing the magnetic field, is a technique discovered as early as 1965?
The scientists were prepared to test this magnetic field disruptor at fully powered or 100% power. And The scientists were a little nervous because they had no idea exactly what was going to happen when they applied full power to this magnetic field disruptor. As my friend Gerald, a national security investigator, described to me, it was much like the Manhattan Project. Some of the scientists were not sure that this disruptor would not burn a hole in the earth, explode the atmosphere, or take out and explode most of central Nevada. They had no idea what the potential threat was if something went wrong. Once they fired this up, they were quite astounded to see that nothing happened. There was this circular accelerator that was set up on this large platform with all the test and measurement equipment hooked up to it, just sat there. They had hoped that this accelerator would actually levitate or rise up off the ground, but instead nothing happened. So it was during the next couple of days after the scientists and engineers were looking at the measurements and recordings of the test and measurement equipment, they discovered that the mass and the weight of the circular accelerator had been reduced by 89%. So the only step they could take next, here they had spent decades and billions of dollars trying to recreate the propulsion system from a crashed saucer, I believe, and it doesn't work. So if you have something that works 89%, that reduces mass and weight within proximity to this accelerator, the only way to take advantage of this technology is to hang a triangular, or build a triangular body around this circular accelerator. And that's exactly what the U.S. Air Force did. They took the magnetic field disruptor, which is the core of the TR-3B flying triangle, which is codenamed Astra, and they built a triangular-shaped body around the circular magnetic field disruptor. They put a advanced multi-mode rocket engine, one on each corner of the triangle. The triangle that they fly, the TR-3B, has enormous takeoff, landing, vertical and horizontal speed capabilities because only 11% of the mass has to be propelled by these multi-mode rocket engines. The magnetic field disruptor, which disrupts gravity around the accelerator, is powered by a nuclear reactor. The magnetic field disruptor itself uses an accelerator that has a plasma, a mercury-based plasma that is accelerated to 60,000 revolutions per minute under 250,000 atmospheres of pressure at superconductive temperatures. At some point, I don't have enough details to explain the technology further. At some point, when this magnetic field disruptor is operational, a disruption of gravity around the vehicle takes place. So they use the TR-3B flying triangle, or Astra, for reconnaissance. It has indefinite loiter time. It can fly at speeds vertically or horizontally, at speeds of Mach 9 or 9 times the speed of sound. Many of the triangular sightings, such as Belgium, Spain, France, England, have reported that this craft has made 40 G turns, or in other words, be able to turn with 40 Gs, or 40 gravitational forces of turns. Most pilots can comfortably take 4 or 5, perhaps 6 Gs comfortably, depending on the pilot, the pressure suit, and the circumstances. So many people have doubted that this flying triangle that can make 40 G turns is ours. But when you can reduce mass and weight by 89%, you also reduce G-forces. So if a pilot was making a 40 G turn with 89% reduction, he would basically only be making a 4.1 G gravitational force turn. And it is possible that the flying triangle can make 40 G turns, but the pilots will only feel the effect of a little over 4 Gs. TR-3B also uses something called electrochromatic stealth coating. The skin or coating of the TR-3B can change reflectiveness, radar absorptiveness, and color. So as you can imagine, being able to change these things, you could make the skin of the aircraft look like a cloud background or a star background, so at night or in a clear sky, it would be almost impossible to see. In fact, most what few pictures have been taken of TR-3B have usually been taken as a silhouette.
Now we have reached the core. World Watch reports reveal it. The billions and billions of dollars spent on denial and cover-up are all in vain. The catastrophes, the meteorological changes are all man-made. The ET technology has been proven. In fact, we have brought that proof right in front of your very eyes tonight.
There's another fact that I'm very, very troubled by, is that we have alien engineering and alien knowledge and technology that could improve the lives of people on this planet tremendously. And that information has been purposely withheld from the people on this planet. I cannot accept that.
One solution for the Earth is cold fusion. Dr. Eugene Mallow.
For example, the Patterson power cell of clean energy technologies in the United States. One cell, the size of my thumb, was tested by the Motorola Corporation, and they found that once they got it going, this water cell with a little bit of electricity in it, they could take the electricity away, and the reaction, the nuclear reaction of cold fusion, would continue for days, producing 20 watts out of something the size of my thumb.
What is the state of the Earth, Dr. Brian O'Leary?
The difficulty now is, of course, that the world is in very bad shape. The fossil fuel economy, the $2 trillion per year fossil fuel infrastructure is leading us inexorably into a greenhouse effect and a number of other very severe global environmental problems.
I believe actually one of the worst problems right now is a problem that many people don't think about very much, although there are movies about this: asteroid impacts. You see, asteroid impacts are guaranteed to happen. There's no doubt about it. It is inevitable. There will be impacts on the Earth of large, massive bodies. The only question is when. Eventually, there will be a very big one that will kill lots of people if we do not do something about it. I am an optimist. I believe that the human intellect and the human drive to solve problems will overcome some problems that look unsolvable now. For example, I believe that the threat of global warming will be eliminated by the new discoveries of free energy and cold fusion, and I don't think it is too late at all.
Dr. Mallow, please give us an example of what cold fusion can do.
For example, just in January of 1999, we learned that a major cold fusion company, they don't like the word cold fusion, but they are, Blacklight Power Corporation in New Jersey now, has purchased a $2 million building, and they are near the sites of the academic interests, and they have a wonderful process that has been proved, and one of the batteries that they are talking about making would be only 10 kilograms, and that 10-kilogram battery with this new cold fusion-like process would be able to drive a car 1,000 miles from something that big. Dr. Mills of that company says that if you had a car using his process and you filled up the tank with 40 liters of water, that car would go 100,000 miles, 200,000 kilometers. Amazing. Water is the fuel of the future.
So just as certainly as the Earth is round, there is life out there, watching, probing, monitoring, and testing ours. The truth has finally conquered the denials. The aliens are here. We want to leave you now with these words from Dr. O'Leary. Thank you and goodbye.
The great English philosopher one time said that the resistance to a new idea is proportional to the square of its importance. And we're dealing with some extremely important concepts here, which have been suppressed and denied by the mainstream culture. This is the time for us now to move into those technologies because we need them. We need them for a sustainable global future We need them for a healed planet Earth.